Simone Carter was 33 years old, 30 minutes from walking down the aisle, when she opened a service corridor door looking for a missing garment bag. She wasn't supposed to find her fiancé there. She definitely wasn't supposed to find her maid of honor with him. Derek didn't scramble. He barely flinched. 15 years of friendship, 10 years of building his business from a single laptop and her own credit line, and Yolanda pulled away from him like she'd been caught borrowing a sweater, not a life. Simone didn't scream. She didn't cry. She reached up, slowly removed her earrings, and asked one question. How long? Neither of them could answer fast enough to make it sound new. What Derek didn't know was that every client contract, every design portfolio, every dollar of debt in that business was tied to Simone's name, not his. And she had just realized exactly what that meant. He straightened his tie like the hard part was over. It hadn't started yet. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The veil was crooked. Simone saw it before anyone else did. A 1/4-inch tilt to the left, barely enough to notice unless you'd spent 10 years making sure everything was perfect. She stepped closer to the mirror and adjusted it with 2 fingers, the same way she'd done for 100 brides before this moment. Careful, steady, no wasted motion. Except this time, the veil was hers. She held the thought for exactly 1 second, then let it go. There was still too much to check. The bridal suite at Harmon Hall smelled like gardenias and hairspray. Morning light came through the tall windows in long, pale ribbons, landing on the ivory dress, the champagne glasses lined up on the side table, the small stack of vendor confirmation cards she'd reviewed twice already that morning. Old habit. Even on her own wedding day, she couldn't stop being the event designer in the room. That was Simone Carter, 33 years old, the woman who made other people's biggest days look effortless. She had built Derek's home staging company, Whitfield Interiors, from a name on a business card into something real. When Derek had the charm and the vision but not the clients, she gave him hers. When the company hit 2 lean years and the invoices stopped clearing, she put it on her credit. Her name, her score, her risk. She'd told herself it was an investment in their future. She'd told herself a lot of things. Her own design studio, the one she'd sketched floor plans for on the back of event orders, the one she had a name for, a logo concept, a client list already forming in her head, was still waiting. After the wedding, she'd said, when things settle down. Derek had nodded and agreed and never brought it up again. She smoothed the front of her dress and looked at herself in the mirror. You look good, she thought. Now stop stalling. Behind her, the suite was buzzing. Her cousin Diane was reapplying her lipstick. The florist had just come and gone. Someone's phone kept playing music no one was quite listening to. But Yolanda wasn't there. Simone clocked her absence the way she clocked everything, quietly, without making it a thing yet. Yolanda Price had been her best friend for 15 years, her maid of honor for the last 6 months, and for the past week, she had been acting like a stranger wearing her friend's face. Short answers. Slow replies to texts, a dress fitting she'd canceled twice. At the rehearsal dinner 2 nights ago, Simone had caught Yolanda staring at the floor while the toasts were being made, her champagne glass untouched, her smile a half-second late every time someone laughed. Simone had chalked it up to stress. Yolanda wasn't great with big events. That was Simone's gift, not hers. But the strangeness sat in her chest like a small stone she couldn't swallow. Has anyone seen my garment bag? Simone asked the room. Diane looked up. The white one? I thought Yolanda had it. She's not here. Her mother, Gloria, looked over from the corner chair, where she'd been sitting quietly since morning, watching everything the way she always did, like a woman who had already learned that watching was more useful than talking. I'll ask someone to go look, Gloria said, starting to rise. I've got it. Simone was already moving toward the door. It'll take 2 minutes. Simone. Mom. She said it gently but firmly. 2 minutes. The hallway outside the suite was narrow and quiet. The ceremony was 30 minutes out. The guests were already filling the main hall. She could hear the low, warm hum of 200 people settling into their seats. The string quartet had started their prelude. Everything was on schedule. She followed the corridor away from the noise, toward the back of the venue where the service rooms were. The florist kept overflow storage there. She'd done 6 events at Harmon Hall. She knew every back passage. The garment bag was probably hung on a hook somewhere. Yolanda had probably stepped away and forgotten to tell anyone. There was probably a completely simple explanation for all of it. Simone turned the last corner and reached for the service door handle. She pulled it open. The room beyond was dim, lit only by a small frosted window near the ceiling. A rolling rack of extra chair covers stood against one wall. Her garment bag hung on a hook beside the door. And in the center of the room stood Derek and Yolanda. His hands were on her waist. Her face was pressed into his chest. Neither of them was speaking. They didn't hear the door open. Simone stood completely still. She didn't make a sound. She just looked at them. The way they fit together, easy and close. The way his chin rested on the top of Yolanda's head, like it had rested there 100 times before. Because it had. She knew it the way you know something you've been not knowing for a very long time. This was not a moment of weakness. This was not the first time. Simone didn't move. The door was still open in her hand. The light from the hallway cut across the floor in a thin yellow strip, and she watched it land at their feet as Derek and Yolanda finally pulled apart. Slowly. Too slowly. Derek stepped back first. He turned and saw her, and something happened to his face. Not guilt, exactly. More like the look of a man who had just realized a calculation he'd been running for a long time had finally come up wrong. Yolanda didn't turn around right away. She already knew. "Simone," Derek started. She pulled the door shut behind her. The click of the latch was the only sound she made. She didn't scream. She didn't want to. There were 200 people on the other side of this building, and she had spent 10 years making sure things didn't fall apart in front of a crowd. That habit didn't stop working just because the emergency was her own. She reached up and unclipped her right earring, a small pearl drop. She'd chosen them 6 weeks ago, standing in a jewelry case with Yolanda beside her, asking, "Which ones do you think?" She set the earring in her palm. Then she unclipped the left one. She closed her fingers around both of them. "How long?" It wasn't a question. Her voice was flat and quiet. She didn't need the answer to be loud. Derek opened his mouth. This isn't what you... How long, Derek?" His jaw closed again. He looked at the floor. He looked at Yolanda. He looked back at Simone, and in that small triangle of glances, she got the only answer that mattered. Yolanda still hadn't said a word. She was standing with her arms crossed over her chest, her bridesmaid dress catching the thin gray light, her eyes somewhere near Simone's collarbone. Not her face. She couldn't quite make it to Simone's face. 15 years. Simone had known this woman for 15 years. She pulled her phone from the small pocket hidden in her dress seam. She'd insisted on a pocket. She always insisted on pockets, and typed 2 texts without looking up. To Gloria, "Stay in the suite. Don't let anyone come back here." To Andre, "Same. I'll be out front in 10 minutes. She sent them both. "I'm going to go speak to the officiant," she said. She kept her voice the same way she kept her hands. Still, even, no wasted energy. "You two stay here until the guests have cleared the front hall." "Simone." Derek moved toward her. His voice had shifted into the warm, reasonable register he used when he needed someone to calm down. She'd heard him use it on clients, on vendors, on her mother once, at Thanksgiving, when the conversation got uncomfortable. Can we talk about this? There's still time to... To what? She looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in a long time. Pretend I didn't see you? He didn't have an answer for that, either. She left them there. The officiant was a tall man named Bernard, who had done 3 of Simone's events before this one. He was standing near the side entrance to the ceremony hall, checking his pocket watch when she found him. "Ms. Carter," he said, smiling. 5 minutes ahead of— "We need to postpone." She kept her voice low and even. "Family emergency. Can you go in and let the guests know, please? Ask them to be patient and make their way to the reception room for now. Tell them we'll have more information shortly." Bernard blinked. He looked at her dress, at her face. Whatever he saw in her face made him nod. "Of course. Do you want me to—" "That's all I need. Thank you, Bernard." She turned and walked toward the front of the building. The lobby was still busy. Guests filing in, ushers with programs, a woman in a yellow hat Simone didn't recognize. She walked through all of it in her ivory dress and her bare earlobes and her pearls closed in one fist, and not one person stopped her, because she walked like someone who was exactly where she was supposed to be. Through the glass front doors, down the wide stone steps, into the sharp morning air. Andre's car was parked at the near end of the lot, a clean gray sedan, as unremarkable and dependable as Andre himself. He was already out of the driver's side, watching her cross the lot, his face carefully neutral, the way it always was when he was taking something in. He didn't ask what happened. He just opened the passenger door. She got in. The dress took up most of the seat. She gathered the skirt in her hands and set it across her lap, smoothing it once, an automatic gesture. Then she sat there, looking at the windshield, both hands resting still in the white folds of fabric. Andre got in on the other side. He started the car but didn't pull out. He waited. The string quartet was still playing inside. She could hear it faintly through the glass, the same prelude, still looping, because no one had told them to stop. "I want to see everything," she said. Andre put the car in drive. The tea had gone cold an hour ago. Simone hadn't touched it. Gloria had made it anyway, the way she always made tea when she didn't know what else to do with her hands. 2 bags, a little honey, set down carefully without a word. The mug sat in front of Simone on the kitchen table, a thin skin forming on the surface. The kitchen was the same as it had always been, yellow walls that had faded to something closer to cream, the same curtains with the small blue pattern, the clock above the stove that ran 3 minutes fast and had for as long as Simone could remember. Nothing in this room had changed in 20 years, and right now that sameness felt like the only steady thing in the world. Simone was still in her dress. She hadn't been able to think about changing. Every time the thought came up, she pushed it aside. There was always something more important. The call to the venue coordinator, the text to the caterer, the quiet, clinical work of dismantling a wedding, one vendor at a time. She'd done it from Andre's back seat, still parked in the venue lot, her phone in one hand and the other hand flat against her knee. She was good at the work. She had always been good at the work. Gloria sat across from her. She hadn't pushed, hadn't hovered. She'd made the tea and pulled out the chair across from Simone and sat down in it, and the two of them had been quiet together for a long time. Then Gloria said, "You're sitting the same way I was sitting when your father left." Simone looked up. Gloria wasn't looking at her with pity. That was the thing. There was no pity in her mother's face, just recognition. Quiet, tired, 30-year-old recognition, like she was reading a book she already knew the ending to. "I didn't even realize I was sitting that way," Simone said. Straight back, hands flat on the table, like if you hold still enough, everything'll stop moving. Gloria nodded once. "I know that posture." The clock above the stove ticked, 3 minutes fast. "I always thought—" Simone stopped. She pressed her lips together and looked at the cold mug. Then she said it, because it had been living in her chest for years, and tonight it was too heavy to keep holding. "I always thought he wanted someone who hadn't seen all of it, someone who didn't know about the lean years, the missed invoices, the clients I had to call myself and smooth things over with." She paused. "Someone who just got to see the finished version, the successful version, the one I built." Gloria was quiet. "I thought if I stayed, If I kept being useful, that would be enough to... She stopped again. The word she almost said was, keep him. She didn't say it. I thought that was what love was supposed to look like. I thought that too, Gloria said, once. That landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. They let it sit there. A knock at the back door broke the quiet. 2 short, familiar knocks. Andre let himself in the way he always did, with the door key Gloria had given him years ago when he used to drive Simone home from college. He had a folder under his arm. He looked at Simone's dress. He looked at her face. He set the folder on the table and pulled out the 3rd chair without being invited. Tell me, Simone said. He opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, state filings, registration documents, columns of numbers with dates running down the left margin. He turned the first page to face her and set his finger at the top line. Derek's staging business has 3 active lines of credit, he said. His voice was calm and flat, the voice he used when the numbers were doing all the talking. 2 of them are tied directly to your personal credit history. Your social security number is in the original filing applications. He slid the next page across. The business took on debt in year 2 and year 3. Combined, it's about $62,000. He looked at her. In the event of default, those creditors come to you first. Simone looked at the numbers. And the contracts? She said. Andre pulled out the last page. The profitable client contracts, the interior design clients, the staging portfolio, the event partnerships. Every one of them was signed under the business name, Derek's business name. He set the page down. Your name isn't on a single one. The 3 of them sat there with that. $62,000 of debt with her name on it. A client portfolio worth 3 times that with her name on none of it. Gloria looked at the pages. She didn't touch them. Her jaw tightened once, and then her face went still again. Simone picked up the top sheet. She read it carefully, the way she read vendor contracts, the way she read floor plans. She turned it over. She set it down. I'm not going to be the woman people whisper about, she said. Her voice didn't shake. I'm going to find out exactly what I financed. She looked at Andre, then at her mother. And I'm going to take it back. The dining table had disappeared. That was the only way to describe it. Somewhere under the stacks of printed contracts, the color-coded invoices, the portfolio printouts, and the folders Andre had labeled in his small, exact handwriting, somewhere under all of it was Gloria's dining table, the one with the scratch near the left corner that Simone had put there at age 9, dragging a toy chest across the floor. Gloria had taken herself to the kitchen and stayed there. She brought coffee without being asked and left it on the corner of the table that still had room, and didn't say a word about the papers covering her good tablecloth. Simone had changed out of the dress. She was in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, her hair pulled back, reading glasses on. She looked like herself again. That was important to her, more than she could have explained, that she looked like the person who worked, not the person things happened to. Andre had the laptop open on one end. Simone had a legal pad on the other. They had been at it since 8 in the morning. Okay, Andre said, pulling up a split screen. Look at this. On the left side of the screen was a shared business calendar, the one Simone had set up herself 2 years into building the staging company, so she and Derek could track client appointments and vendor meetings without texting back and forth all day. She hadn't had access to it in months. Derek had changed the password last spring, said he was streamlining the accounts. She had believed that. On the right side of the screen was a column of expense reports Andre had pulled from the business's shared drive before Derek thought to lock her out of it. He'd moved fast on that. Within 3 hours of the wedding falling apart, he'd sent a request to pull her access. But by then, Andre had already copied everything. The calendar first, Andre said. He pointed to a recurring block on Saturday mornings, labeled Site Review, Midtown. It appeared every other week starting 26 months ago. I cross-checked this against the actual client list. There was no Midtown site in the staging portfolio during this period. Not one. Simone looked at the dates. 26 months ago. Derek had proposed 22 months ago. She did that math without blinking, and she let it settle. The expense reports, she said. Andre moved to the right side of the screen. Restaurant receipts. 2 names on reservations pulled from an email thread connected to the business account. A hotel charge in the Catskills, filed under Team Off-Site, in a month when the only other employee on the books was a part-time delivery driver who confirmed he'd never been to the Catskills. She could see him working through it, careful, methodical, without editorializing, and she appreciated that more than she could say. He wasn't performing outrage for her benefit, he was just showing her the ground. He proposed during it, Simone said, not a question. By at least 4 months, Andre said. She nodded once. She wrote a number on the legal pad. Then she pulled a printed invoice from the folder on her right. She'd flagged it 2 hours ago and set it aside without saying why. She set it on the table between them now. It was from a jeweler, dated 22 months ago. The charge was split across 2 cards. One of them was Derek's business card. The other one was a personal card in Simone's name. She recognized the last 4 digits. She had canceled that card 8 months ago when the balance got unwieldy, and she couldn't figure out where half the charges had come from. Now she knew where one of them had come from. She looked at the invoice for a long moment. Then she set it in the document pile and picked up her pen. "Okay," she said. "Let's build the portfolio case." They worked through the afternoon. Andre pulled the client contracts, every major account, every design invoice, every signed staging proposal. Simone went through them one by one and noted the work. Her initial client sketches, referenced in the project notes. Her vendor contacts, listed as the primary points of contact. Her handwriting on the revision notes attached to 3 of the earliest contracts, photographed and scanned before Derek had ever hired anyone else. She had built this. Every room, every client, every referral that came from a satisfied customer who had called her back by name, even when her name wasn't on the letterhead. She had built this and put his name on it, because that was what you did when you were building something together. That was what love was supposed to look like. She wrote that thought down and then crossed it out. Hard. By 6 o'clock, the documentation was sorted into 3 clean categories: financial liability, portfolio authorship, client relationships. Andre had a summary sheet on his laptop. Simone had her own copy on the legal pad. She picked up her phone. She photographed every page, working through the stacks methodically. Then she opened a private cloud drive she'd created that morning under an email address Derek had never seen, and uploaded every image, every file, every document Andre had copied from the shared drive. She watched the upload finish. "I need one more piece before I move," she said. Andre looked up. "I need to know who else already knew." Patricia Whitfield's house always smelled like cinnamon and dryer sheets. Simone had loved that about it once. She had loved the navy blue curtains in the front room, the framed school photos of Derek at every age climbing the staircase wall, the little ceramic bowl by the door where Patricia kept spare keys and butterscotch candies. She had walked into this house 100 times and felt something she didn't feel many places, like she was expected, like someone had been keeping a space warm for her. She rang the bell at 2 in the afternoon. Patricia answered in 30 seconds, which meant she'd seen the car pull up. "Simone!" She opened the door wide and pulled her into a hug before Simone could say a word, both arms firm, the kind of hug that was supposed to feel like an answer. She smelled like the cinnamon candles she kept on the mantel. "Come inside. I made tea." The tea was already on the coffee table in the front room, 2 cups, a small plate of shortbread cookies arranged in a fan. She had been waiting. Simone sat down on the familiar navy couch and looked at the cups and knew, in the back of her mind, something she didn't want to know yet. "I wanted to talk to you before everything became—" Simone stopped, started again. "I needed to hear from someone who loves Derek the way I do. Did." She set her hands flat on her knees. "Did he tell you what happened at the venue?" Patricia sat across from her in the armchair. Her posture was straight. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was wearing pearl earrings. On a Tuesday afternoon, at home. "He called me," Patricia said. "Then you know about Yolanda." Patricia's expression moved, not into surprise. It moved into something more careful. She picked up her tea. "I know this is painful," she said. "I know how much you love my son, and I know how much work you've put into building a life together." "Patricia." Simone's voice was quiet, even. "Did you know?" A pause. 2 seconds. 3. I think, Patricia said carefully, what matters right now is that our families don't get torn apart over something that can still be. I'm not asking what matters right now. Simone didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I'm asking if you knew about Yolanda before Saturday. Patricia set her cup down. She looked at the shortbread cookies for a moment like they might help her. Derek is my son, she said finally. That's not an answer. It is an answer. Patricia looked up. Her eyes were soft, which was somehow worse than if they had been hard. He's my child. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't come first. Something went still in Simone's chest. How long have you known? Patricia straightened the edge of the coaster under her cup. I found out in the spring. He told me himself. He said it was complicated, that he was working through it, that he didn't want to hurt you. He didn't want to hurt me, Simone repeated. He was trying to figure out the right time to. He proposed to me. Simone's voice didn't waver, not even slightly. He put an engagement ring on my finger, and he stood in a church, and he let me plan a wedding for 8 months. And you knew. She looked at Patricia directly. You sat across from me at Easter dinner, and you knew. Patricia's hands tightened in her lap. I didn't want to blow up your relationship over something that might have resolved itself. I thought if I said something, I would only make it worse. I was protecting. Who? Simone asked. Who were you protecting? The room was quiet. Patricia didn't answer. But the answer was already there in the careful tea, in the pearl earrings, in the 2 cups set out in advance for a conversation she had already decided how to have. She had been protecting Derek. She had been protecting the image of a son she could be proud of, the wedding photos that would have hung alongside his school pictures on that staircase wall, the version of the story where things worked out and nobody had to say anything hard. And Simone had been sitting at Easter dinner, cutting her ham, feeling grateful that at least she had Patricia. Simone put down her cup. She stood up. Simone. Patricia's voice was soft, worried even. Please don't do anything you can't take back. For everyone's sake. If you could just let Derek have a little time to. I am not managing Derek's time anymore, Simone said. She picked up her bag from the couch cushion. I'm not managing his image, I'm not absorbing his debts, and I'm not sitting in quiet rooms having quiet conversations so he can sort himself out on his own schedule. She walked to the front door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. She didn't look back. The drive away from Patricia's house was 10 minutes. Simone made it halfway before she picked up her phone and called Andre. He answered on the second ring. The meeting, she said. The one I'm planning. It needs to include everyone. She turned onto the main road, both hands steady on the wheel. No more private conversations. No more rooms where things get managed on his behalf. Everyone. I'll set it up, Andre said. Good, Simone said. She ended the call and kept driving. The florist shop was on a corner off Meridian Avenue, squeezed between a dry cleaner and a sandwich place. It was called Bloom and Gather, and Simone had sent more business their way over the past 4 years than she could count. Weddings, corporate events, gallery openings. She had recommended them to 11 different clients. She knew the owner, Deja, by first name. She knew Deja's daughter had just started middle school, and that Deja kept a rescue cat named Biscuit, who sometimes sat in the window between the peonies. It was a Tuesday morning, bright and cool, and Simone had made the appointment herself. She pushed open the glass door, and a small bell chimed overhead. The shop smelled the way it always did, cool water and green stems and something faintly sweet underneath, like warm roses. Buckets of dahlias lined the left wall. A long wooden work table ran down the center of the room, scattered with wire and ribbon and clippings. Deja was standing at the far end of it, looking up with a smile that dimmed just slightly when she remembered why Simone was here. Hey, Simone. She came around the table and squeezed both of Simone's hands instead of hugging her. I'm really glad you called. I know this is a headache, Simone said. I want to make sure everything gets settled properly. I'm not leaving you with anything unresolved. That was the truth. She had been doing this all week. The caterer, the rental company, the string quartet coordinator, walking in, looking people in the eye, settling every invoice herself, leaving nothing loose. She would not be the kind of woman whose disaster created other people's disasters. Deja pulled the order file from a shelf behind her. It was thick. 300 white garden roses, eucalyptus garland, 24 centerpiece arrangements, a ceremony arch. Months of planning reduced to a manila folder on a wooden table. They worked through it item by item. Deja was kind about it, professional. She waived the cancellation fee on the arch because the flowers hadn't been ordered yet. They negotiated the rest fairly, and Simone wrote the check without flinching. It was her money. It had always been her money. She might as well watch it leave clearly instead of pretending it wasn't going. Deja was walking her back through the deposit breakdown when she paused, glancing up from the file with the easy expression of someone sharing ordinary news. "Oh, I did want to mention, I heard from Yolanda a couple weeks ago. She said it the way you'd mention a weather forecast. Casual, assumed. She was asking about baby shower packages, florals, table arrangements, that kind of thing. She said she was thinking sometime after the fall." Deja smiled, warm and small. "I figured with the honeymoon and everything, you two were waiting until you got back to start the planning, but she wanted to get a head start." Simone heard the rest of the sentence from somewhere far away. After the fall. After the honeymoon. Get a head start. She kept her face still. She had gotten very good at that. "Right," she said. Her voice was smooth and even. "Of course." Deja was already moving on, sliding the final invoice across the table, pointing to the total. Simone looked at it without seeing it. She signed her name where Deja indicated. She folded her copy and put it in her bag. She thanked Deja by name, asked about Biscuit, listened to a 30-second story about the cat knocking over a bucket of tulips, and then she walked out through the glass door and back into the cool morning air. The bell chimed behind her. She stood on the sidewalk for 3 seconds. Then she walked to her car, got in, and sat. The plan had never been to leave her. That was the part that kept turning over in her mind, slow and heavy, like something enormous rolling into place. Yolanda was pregnant, and the baby shower was going to be after the fall, after the honeymoon, after Simone came back from Aruba as Derek Whitfield's wife, with her name signed onto his debts and her credit legally woven into everything he owed. After the window to walk away without catastrophic financial damage had closed for good. The affair was never going to blow up on its own. It was going to wait. The pregnancy was going to wait. Everything was going to wait until Simone was fully bound and had no clean exit left. She wasn't going to be left. She was going to be used, stabilized, financially locked in. And then, once the math no longer needed her, she was going to be handed the wreckage and told to figure it out. She picked up her phone. She called Andre. He answered on the first ring. "The timeline," she said. Her voice was flat and very calm, the way deep water is calm. It was never accidental. She stared at the brick wall of the dry cleaner across the street. It was planned around me. Andre's office was on the 4th floor of a building on Westbrook Street, small and quiet, the kind of place that smelled like printer ink and old coffee. One window faced the street. A second-hand clock on the wall ticked in a steady rhythm that Simone had always found calming. There were no plants, no art, just shelves lined with binders and a whiteboard covered in numbers she didn't fully understand yet, but was learning fast. She had been here every day for the past 3 days. The desk between them was covered now. Not cluttered, but covered in the deliberate way of a case being built. Contracts stacked by date, invoices paperclipped to their corresponding client files. A printed timeline Andre had put together, color-coded in red and black, that showed the business's financial history laid against Simone's personal credit draws. The ring invoice sat at the top right corner of the desk, separate from everything else. A small thing, a precise thing, the kind of detail that said everything about what kind of man Derek Whitfield was. Andre leaned back in his chair and looked at all of it the way a man looks at something he's just finished building. "It's airtight," he said. Simone looked at the timeline. "Walk me through it one more time." He did. He had the patience for repetition, which was one of the things she valued about him. He moved through each section without rushing. The client contracts that listed Derek's company name, but were built entirely on Simone's relationships and design portfolio. The debt structure, which showed that nearly 70 cents of every dollar the business owed traced back to lines of credit opened in Simone's name. The shared calendar timestamps that placed Derek and Yolanda overlapping on out-of-town trips beginning 26 months ago. The proposal was 19 months ago. The ring invoice, sitting alone in its corner, was dated 18 months ago. One card. Her card. "The design portfolio is yours," Andre said. "Every piece in it. Client names, original concepts, documented correspondence. It all traces back to you. His name is on the company. Your work is the company." Simone was quiet for a moment. "And the debt?" "Tied to your credit, at a ratio any judge is going to notice." He tapped the timeline with 2 fingers. "You're not a silent investor, Simone. You're the structure the whole thing was built on. His name was just the sign on the front." She nodded once. She already knew it. Hearing it said out loud, clean and documented, was a different thing. She sat with that for a moment. Outside, a truck rumbled past on Westbrook Street. The clock ticked. She thought about Yolanda asking a florist about baby shower arrangements, while Simone was still picking out linens for the reception tables. She thought about Patricia's rehearsed face. She thought about Derek's fumbled lie in that corridor, how slow it had been, how unsurprised he had really looked underneath it. She had a choice now. She could put everything online. She could send the timeline and the ring invoice to every mutual contact they had. She could let it spread the way those things spread, fast and loud and permanently. Part of her understood why that would feel satisfying for about 10 minutes. She didn't want 10 minutes. She wanted the meeting. "No public exposure," she said. "Not online, not through anyone else." Andre nodded like he'd expected that. Face to face. Face to face. She reached across the desk and picked up the ring invoice, looked at it once, and set it back down. "I want everyone in the same room. I want them to hear it directly from me, with the documents on the table. No phone calls, no secondhand, no version of this that Derek gets to filter before it lands." She picked up her phone. She called her mother first. Gloria answered on the second ring, and Simone explained what she needed. The kitchen table, 3 days from now, enough chairs. Gloria didn't ask questions. She said, "I'll have food," and that was that. Then she called Patricia. Patricia answered warmly, which no longer surprised her. "Simone, sweetheart, I'm having a conversation at my mother's house on Friday evening," Simone said. "I need you there. It's important." A pause. "Is this about—" "It's about finishing the conversation the wedding didn't get to have." Simone kept her voice even and pleasant. "I think you'll want to be there, Patricia." Patricia agreed. Of course she did. She still believed she could manage things. Derek was next. She kept it short, kept it warm enough not to alarm him. He said yes, with the confidence of a man who still believed he was the one setting terms. Then Yolanda. Yolanda answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was careful, like someone walking across ice. "Friday evening," Simone said. "My mother's house. I think we all need to be in the same room." Another pause, then, "Okay." Simone ended the call and set her phone face down on Andre's desk. She looked at the documents spread out in front of her. Every contract, every invoice, every timestamp, everything she had built and financed and made possible, all of it organized and documented and provably hers. She looked at Andre. 3 days, she said. Her voice was quiet, certain. This is the last conversation he will ever get to manage. Gloria's kitchen smelled like coffee and cornbread. She had set out a full spread the way she always did when something serious was happening. A pot on the stove, a basket of bread covered with a dish towel, glasses already filled with water. The table had been cleared of everything except 5 chairs and a single clean placemat at the center, where Simone had asked her to leave space. They arrived within 10 minutes of each other. Patricia came first, dressed in a deep burgundy blouse, her silver hair pinned neat at the back. She smiled at Gloria at the door with the careful warmth of a woman who had always confused being polite with being honest. Derek came second, wearing a pressed collared shirt and a look Simone recognized, confident, slightly pained, the look he wore when he was prepared to be forgiven. Yolanda came last. She was wearing a loose cream jacket. Her hands stayed close to her sides. She did not look at Simone when she walked in. Simone was already seated. She had arrived 40 minutes early. The documentation was already on the table, face down in 3 neat stacks beside her right hand. Andre was not in the room. He was parked outside, and that was exactly where she needed him. This conversation was hers. Gloria offered coffee. Patricia said yes. Derek said sure. Yolanda shook her head without speaking. They sat. The room settled into an uncomfortable quiet. Patricia looked around with the trained patience of someone waiting for someone else to set the tone. Derek leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, like a man preparing to be reasonable. "Simone," he started. "In a moment," she said simply. She turned the first stack of documents face up and slid it to the center of the table. "These are the client contracts from the staging business," she said. "All 41 active accounts. Every one of them was brought in through my professional relationships or directly through my design work. Derek's company name is on the letterhead. My correspondence, my concepts, and my client history are in every file." No one spoke. Patricia's eyes moved to the stack. Derek's jaw tightened. Simone turned over the second stack. "These are the credit records. The business carries debt at a ratio of approximately 70 cents on the dollar back to lines of credit opened in my name." She said it the way Andre had said it to her. Flat, factual, no extra weight on it. "I am legally exposed to that debt. My name is not on a single profitable contract." Patricia set down her coffee cup. Simone turned over the third stack. She placed the ring invoice on top, alone, facing out so Derek could read the card number clearly. Derek looked at it. Something moved behind his eyes and then went still. "The design portfolio and the client relationships belong to me," Simone said. "I've already filed the documentation to dissolve the business partnership and reclaim both under my own name. That process started 4 days ago. It cannot be reversed by anything that happens in this room." "Simone." Derek's voice came out careful, practiced. "I hear you. I do. But I think, if we take a breath here, there is still something worth saving. We built this together. That means something. I think we can still fix this." Simone looked at him. She let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds. "Derek?" Her voice was even, not cold, not loud, just clear, the way a straight line is clear. "There is nothing left to fix. The business is already being dissolved. The portfolio is already mine on paper. The accounts have already been contacted." She paused. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here so that no one in this room can say later that they didn't hear it directly from me." His jaw moved. He looked to Patricia, a reflex he'd probably had since childhood. Patricia looked at the table. Simone turned to Yolanda. Yolanda's hands were flat on her thighs. She was looking somewhere near the center of the table, not at Simone, not at anything. "The vendor and venue community I've built my career in over the last 10 years, Simone said, already knows why the wedding was postponed. I contacted them personally, not online, no posts, no forwarded messages. I called them myself, one by one, the same way I built those relationships in the first place." She kept her voice even. "That community is my professional world. You'll be planning events in it too, I imagine. I thought you should know." Yolanda's throat moved. She didn't speak. The room was very quiet. Patricia opened her mouth once and then closed it. There was nothing to manage here. The documentation was already signed. The calls had already been made. Everything had already been moved before anyone sat down, and Patricia was smart enough to understand that now. Simone gathered the first stack, then the second, then the third. She squared them together, slid the ring invoice between the pages, and placed the whole set back into her folder. She stood up. She looked at her mother, who was leaning in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded across her chest. Gloria gave one small nod. Simone picked up her folder, pushed in her chair, and walked to the front door. She opened it herself. She stepped through it. She pulled it shut behind her with a soft, final click. The studio space was on Calloway Street, second floor, above a print shop that smelled like warm paper and ink. It had big windows that faced west. In the late afternoon, the light came through at an angle that turned the white walls gold. Simone had walked through the empty space twice before she signed the lease, measuring corners with her hands the way she always measured rooms, not just for furniture, but for how a space felt when no one was performing in it. It felt honest. She signed the lease on a Tuesday. By the end of that first week, the calls had started. Marcus Webb was first. He ran a residential property group that had been one of the staging business's biggest accounts for 3 years. He called on a Wednesday morning, apologized briefly for the timing, and said what Simone already knew. He had always been her client, not Derek's. He had stayed with the company because she was in it. He asked if she was taking new business under her own name. She told him she was. "Then I'd like to move our account," he said. "All of it." He was not the last. By the second week, 4 more clients had made the same call. A hotel group, a commercial developer, 2 private residential accounts that had started as single projects and grown into something steady over years. They all said versions of the same thing. They had trusted her eye. They had trusted her to show up when she said she would and deliver what she promised. They were glad to know where she'd landed. Each call, Simone wrote the name down in a legal pad she kept on the corner of her desk. Not to track the number, just to have it in her own handwriting. Word of what happened to Derek's business moved the way things moved in the industry. Quietly, but completely. Without the design work, the client portfolio, or Simone's name attached to the proposals, the remaining accounts had nothing to hold them. 2 contracts were canceled in the first 10 days. 3 more followed the month after. A commercial deal Derek had been trying to close for months fell through when the client called to verify the portfolio and found nothing current to point to. By the end of 6 weeks, there wasn't enough left to sustain the overhead. Simone heard this from Andre, who heard it from the public filings. She didn't go looking for it. The friend group dissolved the way friend groups do when the center shifts. Not loudly, but completely. Most of them had been Simone's people first. Her college friends, her industry contacts, the women she'd known since her 20s who showed up to her events and tagged her in things, and texted her on her birthday before she texted them. They had tolerated Yolanda the way you tolerate anyone your best friend brings close. Not because of her, but because of Simone. When Simone stepped back, the warmth went with her. Yolanda was visibly pregnant now. She posted things sometimes that didn't get the responses she was used to. Invitations she sent out came back with polite excuses. The group chats she'd been included in went quiet. No one said anything cruel. No one had to. They simply remembered whose table they'd been sitting at all along, and they knew that table had moved. Patricia called on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after the meeting at Gloria's house. Simone answered. "I've been thinking," Patricia said. Her voice had the careful, measured quality of someone who had rehearsed but was pretending not to have. "I want you to know I love you. I've always thought of you as a daughter. What happened? I handled it wrong. I know that." Simone stood at her studio window. The street below was quiet. A delivery truck idled at the corner. "I appreciate you saying that, Patricia." "I'm hoping we don't have to lose each other over this," Patricia said. "That we can still—" "You knew for months," Simone said. "Not hard, just clear. Not days, months. And every time you saw me, you made a choice." The line was quiet. "Trust doesn't come back from that," Simone said. "Not because I'm punishing you, just because that's how trust works." Patricia made a small sound, not quite an argument. "I don't wish you anything bad," Simone said. "I genuinely don't. But I think you know this isn't something I'm going to change my mind on." She said goodbye. She ended the call. She stood there for a moment with her phone face down against her palm, looking out at the street. She didn't feel cruel. She didn't feel sad. She felt the quiet, specific weight of a decision that had cost something and been right anyway. The sign went up on a Thursday evening. 2 men from the installation company worked from a lift, drilling the mounting brackets into the brick above the second-floor windows, while Simone stood on the sidewalk below and watched. The letters were clean and white against a deep charcoal panel. Carter Design Studio. Her name, her words, her building. The last bracket went in as the sun dropped behind the print shop roof. One of the workers called down that they were done. She looked up at it for a long moment, the letters sitting flush and solid against the brick, exactly where she had decided they would go. The studio smelled like fresh flowers and warm paper. Simone had learned, in her first year of running the place alone, that a studio either feels like work or it feels like yours. The trick was making it both. She'd done that slowly, the way she did most things, with intention rather than speed. A long work table down the center of the main room, swatches pinned to a corkboard that ran the full length of one wall, sample books stacked by season, not by alphabet, because she knew how she thought better than any filing system did. The west-facing windows still turned the walls gold in the afternoon. Andre's office was through the frosted glass door at the back. He kept it neat in a way that made Simone's organized chaos look louder by comparison. His name was on the business cards under hers. Carter Design Studio. Andre Whitmore, Financial Operations. He had argued, mildly, against being listed at all. She had overruled him without much discussion. He had accepted this the way he accepted most things, with a brief, dry look and no further objection. Gloria arrived at 10:30, carrying a coffee she'd bought from the place on the corner because she didn't trust herself to show up empty-handed. Simone heard her on the stairs before the door opened. She knew her mother's step, the slight pause on the third stair, the deliberate pace that said she was taking in the building the way she took in most things, carefully, before committing to a response. The door swung open. Gloria stood in the frame for a moment. She looked at the corkboard, the work table, the sample books, the light coming in through the big windows and pooling on the floor in long, even rectangles. She looked at the sign lettering on the frosted glass of the interior door. She looked at Simone. She didn't say much at first. She crossed the room and set her coffee on the corner of the work table and looked around the way a person looks at something they have been quietly hoping for without letting themselves say so. "This is yours," Gloria said. Not a question, just naming it. "Yeah," Simone said. "It is." Gloria picked up a fabric swatch from the nearest stack, turned it over in her fingers, set it back exactly where she'd found it. She moved slowly through the room the way you move through a place that belongs to someone you love, careful, a little reverent, trying not to disturb the arrangement of it. She stopped at the corkboard. There were mood boards pinned across the top row, 12 of them, each one a different event, a different client, a different vision Simone had built and delivered in the last year alone. Gloria looked at them for a long time. "You were always this good," she said quietly, not to fill the silence, just because it was true. Simone stood a few feet back with her hands loose at her sides, watching her mother look at the work. She thought about the kitchen table, the cold tea, the wedding dress she'd still been wearing, the posture her mother had recognized before Simone had even spoken a word. She didn't say any of that out loud. She didn't need to. The room said it for her. Andre appeared from his office with a folder, nodded once at Gloria, and handed Simone a set of signed vendor confirmations for the Beaumont wedding. She reviewed them at the work table while Gloria sat in the low chair by the window and drank her coffee and watched. The Beaumont wedding was 4 weeks out. The couple, first-time clients referred by Marcus Webb, had trusted Simone completely from the first consultation. No second-guessing, no managing her vision to fit someone else's idea of what it should be. They had sat across from her at this same work table and told her what mattered to them, and then let her work. Simone had been designing weddings for most of her adult life. She knew the mechanics of them, the load-bearing details, the moments that mattered more than any guest realized. She had produced 200 events, maybe more, and carried each one in her hands until it was finished and set free. She had spent a decade carrying Derek's work in those same hands. His name on the contracts, his name on the proposals, his name in the credits while she moved through rooms like someone who was just helping, just finishing things up, just making sure everything was perfect before stepping back. Derek's business had been gone for months. She'd heard this from Andre, who'd noted it briefly in passing, the way you note a weather system that already passed. She hadn't looked it up. She didn't need the details. Yolanda had the baby. A girl, from what reached her through the industry grapevine, not sought. Derek's involvement, by the same account, was uneven at best. None of it landed near Simone anymore. It existed somewhere else, in a life that was no longer adjacent to hers. Late in the afternoon, after Gloria had gone, after Andre had locked his office and headed out with a wave and no ceremony, Simone stood alone in the studio. The Beaumont display was finished on the center table. She had worked on it all week. Fabric, color, proportion, the specific quality of light a setting needed to feel like the couple's life rather than a catalog page. She had made every choice herself, from the first sketch to the final arrangement. She stepped back now to look at it. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.